I'm not like Paul. You can give him a microphone and he can just talk forever. Me, it makes me nervous. I think probably one of the most common questions that I've received lately is, how is Africa? And you know, that's probably the hardest question to answer because I can't just give one word, and I can't, especially not if you want a short answer. But because Africa was a lot of things. It was amazing. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I learned a lot, and sometimes it's kind of hard to put into words, I guess. But as many of you know, I spent several months back in August in Mombasa, Kenya. And Mombasa is the second largest city in Kenya, and it's on the coast, so it's a major port for East Africa. And I was a volunteer with an organization called Global Vision. And there was a group of us from all over the United States, Europe, Australia, the Middle East. And we were teaching in 2 village schools in the outskirts of the city. And when I say village schools, I mean pretty much the slums, because the village, if you lived in the village, you lived basically in mud huts, no running water, and sometimes electricity. And these schools were for children that couldn't afford to go to the government schools. And so I taught standards 3 and 4. I taught them English, reading, and depending on the availability of a local teacher, I taught them math and science. I had about 30 to 50 kids in my class, depending on the day. I had all age ranges pretty much, 8 to 15, and pretty much all ability ranges too, from nothing to on par for their standards. So, and if everything went as planned, I had a piece of chalk, I had an exercise book for the kids, and I had about 1 textbook for every 3 kids. So to say that each day was a challenge was a little bit of an understatement. And you should have seen, the first few weeks were crazy. They literally hung from the rafters, and they stood on the tables, or the desks that they sort of had, because once they found out that I wasn't going to hit them for not listening or misbehaving, it took a while to get them to listen. But eventually they came around, and we had a lot of fun. We spent a lot of time singing and dancing and learning, but we did a lot of playing too. I had several kids that would, at the end of every day, they would walk me to the edge of the village. And really I could have a story about each one of the kids, but that would take all day. But I don't know, something happened over there that I didn't quite expect. The truth is, I love kids wherever I go. And this was no different, or so it seemed. Their personalities and their smiles were contagious. They were full of energy and joy and enthusiasm. And what's not to love, right? And it didn't take long at all for me to love these kids. But what I didn't realize was what it would be like to love kids that didn't have the world and opportunities at their fingertips, that were always hungry, that didn't have the clothes that they need, that couldn't read because whenever they were actually at school, they were asleep on the floor. Some would come to school barefoot, and some were afraid to go home. I had this one girl in my class that I would meet on the way to school every morning and walk her to and from school because she was afraid of getting beat up by some of the older kids. You know, I just didn't expect that loving them would hurt so much. I would pray for their safety every day, but that didn't really change the fact that in the mornings they would come in hungry and tired and hurt or with crushed spirits. And I started to ask God a whole lot of questions. Why? Why aren't you doing something? And I started to think, and my heart broke for all the ways that I could see their suffering, and I wanted to change their situation more than you know. Because the truth is, when you love people, you feel their joy, but you also feel their pain. And for a while, I let things seem impossible. You know, if the kids were to ask me for food, or I gave them medicine or clothes, and the headmaster found out, he was a local Kenyan, he would cane them. And for a while, I felt like I couldn't do anything to help make change. I just kept saying, there's too much. I can't do anything, and what I try to do isn't working. But slowly I began to discover that God wasn't asking me to focus on what I couldn't do, and to stop asking why, and to stop looking at the roadblocks and all the ways it seemed impossible, and to do what I could do. And that was to love those children right where they were at, and to love them so that maybe they could feel worthy of being loved by Jesus. And I realized that you have to love people even if it hurts, or even if they are not easy to love. And that's no matter where you are, whether it's here or in Africa, because what if no one else does? After my several months in Kenya, I relocated to a short ways away in Tanzania, and it was right near the Kenyan border. And they're also very rooted in Swahili language and culture, so it was fun to be in a similar setting and learn more of the language. And I don't know how many of you know of UMBIM, which is United Methodist Volunteers in Mission, but Methodist projects all over the world can apply to have UMBIM volunteers placed with them. And so when I saw an opening in Tanzania, I jumped at the opportunity to go back to East Africa. And so I was an UMBIM volunteer with Grassroots Ministry, and it's a ministry that originated out of United Methodist Church in Dayton, Ohio. And so this ministry in Tarime, Tanzania, had an orphanage, which was a home to 53 orphans from 3 to 19. And in the evenings, I spent a lot of time there, talking with them, swimming, helping them with chores. And then during the school day, I spent my time at the secondary school. Education is very hard to come by in Tanzania, especially secondary school. And so in a search to try to provide a quality education for the Angel House kids, Grassroots decided to open a secondary school themselves. And so during the day, I spent a lot of time at the school. When I was there, they're in their second year right now, so I helped a lot with administrative stuff. And most of their staff, actually pretty much all of it, is local Tanzanians, but I helped them with finances and administrative stuff. And I taught a lot about computers and helping with kind of their files, and I helped communicate with the board back in the United States. So it was and really each day was different. Sometimes I would go to the bank and the post office, and that was it, because it took all day. And things never really went as planned there, ever. Never. Every day you wake up and you're like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do today, and it never works like that. But the cool part was they never really got upset about that, because their relationships are more important than the tasks at hand. Living in Africa is challenging and uncomfortable in a lot of ways. And sometimes when you wake up in the morning and a cold shower was not really appealing. And at first, I only took showers when the shower actually worked, but then I realized that wasn't going to work either. I actually had to, or I would never take a shower, so I had to fill up a bucket. And sometimes eating interesting food and having reliable electricity can wear on you. But then you spend time with the people there, and it makes it all go away. Like in the afternoons, the Angel House kids, when they would get home from school, they would come running over to find me over at the secondary school. They would gather all my stuff, whether I was ready to go or not, and they would escort me over to play. And I would help them do chores, and they have a very large garden, or shamba as they call it, that helps feed them. And a lot of times they would have to haul water. And so they taught me how to hold a bucket out of the well and fill your thing and put it on your head. And they would help me get it on my head, but if I leaned too far forward, I would drench them. And so I helped them with their chores. And every Sunday after church, when I would walk over there, there would be a group of them standing there waiting to go swimming. And we would go swimming every Sunday afternoon. Because there, you see, it's all about relationships. Everyone invited me to their house. Literally every week I was at least at someone's house for dinner, because there that's what they do. They invite you to their home. They want you to meet their family. They want to give you a meal and to talk and get to know you. And they taught me a lot about hospitality. They gave even when they didn't have a lot to give. And they made sacrifices just to make me feel welcome. And sometimes I wonder how things would be different here if we saw relationships and hospitality as important as they did. And what would happen if we spent more time building relationships and investing in the lives of those around us. You see, when I would go to church on Sunday morning, it was like a celebration. They were excited to be there, and they sang and they danced in the aisles. And I even went to church with people that all they had to give was fruit, but they brought it anyway because that's what they do. They give even if it's a sacrifice. The people there taught me a lot about Jesus and what it looked like to really love people, even if it hurt and required sacrifices. I think some of you have been reading the Adam Hamilton Why book, if I'm correct. And it says in there, when God wants something done in the world, God calls people to do it. When the poor are going to be fed, God doesn't rain down manna from heaven. God sends people. When the sick are going to be cared for, God sends people. When justice is going to be sought, God sends people to fight for it. When others are discouraged and in need of love, God sends people to offer encouragement and care. So I tell you all of this morning not because I think everyone needs to go to Africa, but because I hope that no matter where you are, that maybe you will love someone even if it's not easy or if it hurts. Because I don't think we always do that here. We live such separate lives, and we don't always want to feel. And I tell you this because I hope that maybe we can just not think about serving others, maybe we can do it. Like Anne-Marie. She's a pretty awesome girl. And back in August, she gave me this bracelet, and it says, remember. And I wore it with me, and so a lot of little kids have touched it now. Every day, at least, I had all these little kids coming up to me and just playing with it, feeling it, and trying to read what it says. And it says, remember. And they would ask me, if they figured out what it said, they would ask me what it meant. And I would tell them to remember that Jesus loves you. But sometimes over there, they didn't understand me. Whether it was the language barrier or I don't know what. And so I started to think about not just having a bracelet, but what if we all lived in a way that reminded people that Jesus loved them. So I have a short little video of some of the pictures. Really, I have a lot more pictures and stories to share, but so if you guys can't see, you can come over to the side.